Hi everyone, it's Lena here, and I'm extremely excited to present you with Arturia's latest recreation of its long-time classic, MiniBrute V. Let's dive into it. MiniBrute V is a new virtual instrument emulation from Arturia, but this time of one of its own hardware products, the MiniBrute. MiniBrute was Arturia's first all-analog hardware synthesizer. Released in 2012, this monophonic synth helped usher in the analog renaissance of the early 2000s. It was a unique and affordable entry point into the analog world and many producers' first synth back in the day. MiniBrute V is a state-of-the-art software model of the original. It has the same raw energy and analog power as the original, but now as an 8-voice polysynth, with mono mode of course, with the added convenience of a built-in FX rack and a patch browser. As you can hear, MiniBrute V is a formidable synthesizer. We took great care to emulate it as closely as possible and improve it where it made sense. MiniBrute is a single oscillator synthesizer, but it comes with multiple waveforms that you can freely mix together. Use the mixer section to balance between saw, square, triangle, and a sub oscillator. There's also a noise generator to add a bit of texture. Let's have a closer look at each wave and how we can mess around with them. Here we have the analog classics, sawtooth, square, and triangle. In the oscillator section, we have different wave shapers for each waveform. For sawtooth, there's an ultra saw knob. It multiplies our saw by adding more instances of that same wave and then slightly detuning them. It is a special type of waveform modulation that creates a rich, animated sound. Use ultrasaw amount knob to control the intensity of depth of the ultrasaw effect, while the ultrasaw rate knob adjusts the speed at which the tuned waveforms modulate against each other. For the square wave, here we have a classic pulse width control. Turning this knob will adjust the pulse widths of our waveform. This kind of modulation really shines when animated. For that, we can use the envelope amount knob. By changing its value, we change how much the filter envelope affects the pulse widths of the square wave. In addition to that, we could animate this parameter using the LFO. Now let's hear the triangle wave. The triangle is a very smooth wave with a few overtones in its core. To spice it up with timbral complexity and character, we can use our metallizer. Metallizer wave shapes our oscillator and gives those extra harmonies to our sound, making it a more aggressive and metallic sound. Just like with the square wave, we can use the filter envelope to modulate the metallizer using the envelope amount knob, or we can modulate the metallizer with our LFO. Mix them all and try to find a sweet spot for your sound. In addition to these three waveforms, MiniBrute has a sub-oscillator which can be set to a sine or square wave, either 1 or 2 octaves below the other waveforms. Mix them all together to get the sound that you need. Here's a tip. If you push the mixer levels high, you'll start driving the sound, giving it some nice saturation. So watch your levels. Besides the classic waveforms here, we also have a noise generator that can add white noise to your mix. It's great to make percussive sounds or to add texture to your sound design. The filter is an important part of any classic subtractive synthesizer. We use it to shape our sound by cutting off the frequencies we don't need. MiniBrute's filter is inspired by the Steiner-Parker design that has a different character to a lot of other similar synths, and comes with 4 modes. Low pass. This classic mode allows frequencies below the cutoff point to pass through while reducing higher frequencies. Bandpass. This mode passes through a specific range of frequencies centered around the cutoff point. High pass is the opposite of low pass. Frequencies above the cutoff point are going through. A notch creates a notch of frequencies centered around the cutoff point. The resonance control emphasizes frequencies near the cutoff point, creating a peak or resonance at that frequency. The more you crank it, the higher the peak you get. Let's hear it out. MiniBrute V's filter is also able to self-oscillate. If we turn off the oscillators, put the cutoff about midway, and turn the resonance high up, then we can listen to the sine wave made by the filter itself. We can choose the tone of it by turning the cutoff knob. Or we can play chromatically simply by turning the keyboard tracking control knob up to 100. We can also use the keyboard tracking control knob to open the filter more. The higher we play, the more the filter opens. Up next, we have the brute factor. It's the MiniBrute's signature sound, a special feedback circuit that takes the synth's output and feeds it back into its input to overdrive and distort our signal. A higher amount of brute factor introduces a really gnarly distortion effect. The brute factor amplifies everything the filter and oscillator mixer are doing. So play around with the cutoff and resonance and change the oscillator mixer levels to either tame the brute factor or unleash it. Alright, now we have the envelope amount knob. It does the same job as those for the oscillator wave shapers, but this time it affects the filter's cutoff. MiniBrute V has two envelopes, one that is shared by the filter cutoff and oscillator wave shapers. It is controlled by envelope amount bipolar knobs, and the second envelope is dedicated to our amplifier. If I want to make a bass sound, I can set my envelope to short attack and release. Let's choose a mono mode in our polyphony section down here, so if we accidentally hit another note, it will stop the previous one from playing. It sounds nice, but let's beef it up a little more by turning on Unison. What it does is that it acts like an ultra saw, but this time for all the voices. We can change the tuning of each voice with the detune knob, and don't forget to choose how many voices you want to use. The more voices, the fatter our sound. Up next, we have an LFO, which stands for Low Frequency Oscillator. It's an oscillator that produces frequency typically way below the human hearing range, and we can use this LFO to modulate different parameters over time. We start by choosing a waveform, set our rate, sync to our track tempo or not, and then apply it to one of the above four parameters. Keep in mind that these knobs are bipolar, which means that we can use them to change a parameter up or down. Right next to the LFO, we have an Arpeggiator. It's a function that allows us to play a sequence of notes automatically from a held chord in a specific pattern. Alright, the next section is dedicated to our MIDI controller. Velocity can modulate your parameters based on how hard or soft you hit the notes while playing. Let's apply it to the amp. Now I have the controller which is velocity sensitive, so when I press my keys softly, the sound is significantly quieter. The filter knob affects how the filter envelope responds, so at soft velocities it will barely have any effect, whilst at hard velocities it will fully work. So keep in mind that you'll need to set a filter envelope and use the filter and oscillators envelope amount knobs to hear this effect. Aftertouch applies modulation depending on the pressure applied to the key after it was already struck and while you are still holding it down. Not every controller has that functionality, so don't forget to check your device's specifications to know whether you can use it or not. Now let's add the vibrato effect. Vibrato modulates our virtual device's pitch. Rate sets the modulation speed, and vibrato type defines whether the pitch only moves up, down, or both up and down. This is generally controlled using Aftertouch. However, don't get upset if your controller doesn't have that function. You can apply vibrato with the modulation wheel. Just choose vibrato as a destination, then choose the preferable amount of the modulation that should be applied, and spin that wheel. You can also use the mod wheel to modulate the amount of LFO or to open and close the filter. The pitch glide knob sets the slide duration to reach the new pitch. It changes the time it needs to get from one note to the next. The bigger the distance between notes, the more time it will need to glide to the next one. But that's not all. Arturia added a hidden panel right above our pitch bend and mod wheels. If we press on it, we will find a dispersion setting for our synth. These settings recreate the imperfections that give analog hardware its characteristic sound, as well as the slight variations in response you might find from one hardware MiniBrute to the next. Lastly, let's see the additional effects section. Here we have up to 4 bus effects that we can use simultaneously. It has an astonishing 17 available dynamic, spatial, and modulation effects. Each one provides many hands-on controls and one dry-wet fader to control the mix ratio. These provide lots of possibilities, allowing you to adjust your final sound and make it perfectly fit inside of your mix. Let's see the difference between dry and processed signals. Alright, that's it for this video. I hope this tutorial gave you an understanding of our new MiniBrute V and its features. Give it a try, enjoy the experience, and as always, get creative with your ideas. If you like what you saw, be sure to subscribe and leave a thumbs up too. Thank you so much for watching, and see you soon. Bye.